Chimera of the Chapel by Bleakmidwinter. Summary. When Will Graham wakes up from a coma 3 months after the fall, Jack reveals that Hannibal Lecter didn't survive. Outside the realm of Hannibal's influence, Will decides to discover the full truth behind the world's sudden and seeming falsehood. Everybody seems to hold their own opinion on Hannibal's fate, but Will knows better than anyone that trust and honesty are as elusive as death. For those of you concerned, no, Hannibal isn't actually dead. This story is narrated by Will Graham.
And Hannibal Lecter.
Chapter 4. Days pass in a blur. Will is abandoned in his own mind. Molly is absent so often, he cannot help but to plunge deep into its recesses and relive past events. He's been stuck in this state before. Once, when Hannibal discarded him in Baltimore with a fresh scar on his belly and a gaping heart turned inside out for the world to see. This is a different kind of stagnation, though. He's sluggish, unwilling to move much at all. He feels like one of those overfed lizards in the pet stores that crawl under their hides for days and suffer through deafening bursts of glass tapping. He frequents the rug in front of the sitting room's fireplace, never bothering to search the house for a match, opting instead to sit and stare into the jumble of ashen logs and blackened brick. Moments of clarity come most often during cold showers, where he finds temporary solace from his despondency. The colder, the better. It blanks out his runny thoughts. The quiet of the stream hasn't comforted him since waking up in the hospital, nor has it been feasible company in any sense. In such a state of suspension, he would normally reconcile his emotional disorientation by retreating into either a stream of the mind or a stream of nature. The stream located by the main property is calmer than most, and no matter if he dresses in his waders and sinks waist-deep into it or merely lies by the edge of the stream, he unfailingly finds himself increasingly restless. The stream in his mind is worse. The water ripples there, uncontrollably loud and abrasive, and Will is instantly forced to tear the veil away and return to reality, where the silence is beginning to sound just as abrasive as the troubled tides. When Molly does come around, it's usually with her friend in tow, which is an honest-to-God relief for Will, who has officially exhausted his efforts of acting as proper husband material. He knows Kenny may not be around forever to entertain Molly, but for now, it's a welcome bandage on a gushing wound, in a series of wounds he's constantly scrambling to patch up and restitch. Neither of them tried to initiate sex with each other when she does spend the nights, and neither of them converse much beyond the basic topics. The weather, the kid, the dogs, even fishing. Both of them are experts at ignoring an elephant in the room. But each time she leaves, the rope connecting them together in this life is pulled taut, and fractional as it may be, fractions will lead up to an inevitable sum. Will bides his time. Anyone lucky, or unlucky enough to know him, knows he is not a proprietor for the concept of change. He likes routine. He likes things to be familiar, or else he'll fall into conduct not suited for principled society. As Hannibal might point out, he prefers the fit of his moral dignity pants, despite the flaws in their flimsy design. The man might have even called them cheap. So he drinks his coffee black every morning, takes Winston outside to relieve himself and stretch his legs, and eats the omelets Molly cooks, kisses her cheek like a normal husband with no baggage, and wishes her safe driving, and well wishes to Wally on her path out the door. It's fortuitous if he gets her to leave with a smile on her face. Then, when he's confident she's gone until at least daybreak, he retreats into the backyard to call Freddie again. This may be the 6th or 7th time, after 6 or 7 days of obsessively ruminating on what he'll say when she picks up. It rings and rings fruitlessly, and though today has been no different than any other day at home, he ends up kicking the pile of logs by the fire pit in a short burst of rage.
Will does what any average individual might do when someone they urgently need to call isn't picking up the damn phone. He spends an excruciating hour on the line with his cell phone provider to change his area code. just in case Freddie's blocked any calls from Maine, specifically. He cannot fathom a reason beneficial to her that she would, but he has a hunch, considering her voicemail recording still plays out each time he calls, and it does in fact ring the allotted amount it should. Her number hasn't vanished like Alana's. It's a painstaking process that takes 4 hours on top of a priorly lengthy conversation with a phone company, but when it's finished, he owns a fresh new area code to trick Lowndes with. He resumes pacing around the fire pit before he tries her again. Hannibal may have called his present behavior contrarily anxious. When Winston bounds off to chase a squirrel into the woods, or bites the bullet and dials, it rings once, twice, 3 times, and then lo and behold, Freddie Lowndes picks up the phone. Finally.
Freddie Lowndes of TitleCrime.com speaking.
Stunned, Will almost forgets to speak. After all this wasted time in limbo, he feels abruptly thrust back into a world he's meant to interact.
Hello.
Freddie! Long time no libel.
There is a pressing silence before Freddie scoffs, uneasy.
Will Graham. I swear, your gift basket must have gotten lost in the mail.
Let's cut to the chase. Will conjects, settling into one of the camp chairs. It is blanketed in a sheet of ice that clings to his pant legs.
You block my number. You hire a co-writer. Your writing on the Ripper is severely lacking. What do you know?
He hears the click of a pen.
Well, you don't sugarcoat anything, do you? What do you suspect I know?
It's more what I suspect we both suspect.
No. Mr. Graham, you know better than anyone else I don't offer a thing unless it's involved in an exchange of sorts. Tit for tat.
Will releases a long-suffering sigh, which Freddie must hear because she proceeds with,
You have nothing to hold over me, and I don't have anything to hold over you.
That being the case, this is much more a conversation between old friends than it is business partners. How was the coma?
restful.
I would accuse you of haggling for a statement, but as of late you seem averse to the topic of me, Hannibal, or the dragon.
Her attempts at avoiding his line of questioning haven't worked thus far, and she falls quiet, most likely out of convalescence. She is unsure of what her next move must be, and it's becoming clear there is, in fact, or was, a higher power dictating what she wrote and produced on the subject. Lowndes isn't the type to bow easily to order in her chaos.
You don't fool me.
He hisses, lips almost touching the speaker.
You haven't stopped for a second. If there's puzzle pieces missing, you find them, regardless of if you're publishing your findings or not. And if it's an exchange you want, I haven't learned much. But I know enough to offer you something of importance. If he's forced to bargain with the knowledge that a videotape existed at the scene of the crime, then so be it. He's not loyal to Jack any longer. And you can do whatever you like with it, but in return, I want any information you've gathered.
What kind of information?
You know what kind.
I don't want to disappoint you, Will.
Her voice drops to a whisper.
The government offered me an enormous sum to write only a bare minimum of articles on the Ripper Dragon Showdown, fully edited.
And what little information I could gather.
I don't know. Not a lot of it adds up.
You're the most shameless, exploitative writer I know.
Thank you.
And you're telling me you haven't been sniffing around for details?
Of course I have. But what I'm trying to tell you is that I only have one more article I'm allowed to write about before I'm no longer allowed to talk about that night. The participants. And what I do have isn't good enough for the grand finale I want.
Get me? I'm not sure how far it'll get you.
What I have may appease you.
It better. They've got this Ripper stuff under lock and key.
Signing that contract might have been the stupidest thing you've ever done, Freddie.
Will laments, grumbling as he rubs a hand over his face to soothe his irritation.
They offered a lot of dough. You do realize I do this for the money, right?
Fine. I want to meet.
Aw, Will. I didn't know you cared.
Jesus, he exclaims, prodding hard at his throbbing temples. Can you take this seriously for 5 seconds?
I don't want just the information you're offering.
Whatever that is.
I wouldn't be much of a gambler if I didn't account for the fact you may screw me over.
You do like your contingencies.
If I'm risking this, you're giving me an exclusive.
Will exhales through his nose and grinds his teeth.
Fine. He repeats in a low snarl.
Freddie doesn't respond for a moment, taken aback. They exchange a location, a time, alterable if need be. I have a condition too, he utters, before he can change his mind. She hums, inquiring, and he can hear her scribbling something down excitedly over the line. Maybe their rendezvous point. Don't use the phrase murder husbands in the article you release. Laughter crows from Freddie, a sharp mocking noise.
Oh? But you're wounding my creative process.
You've never had a creative process. You've entertained blatant lies, exaggerations, and hypocrisies riddled with bias, all lumped together under a blandishing umbrella of glittery persuasions.
I should have hired you to be my editor.
Freddie croons dryly. I was busy being unconscious.
Hannibal was right. You do have a way with words.
Huh? Wait, when did he tell you that? Lowndes chuckles and frustratingly refuses to answer.
See you Monday, Mr. Graham.
Will curses under his breath when he hears the line beep to a close. He pockets his phone and strides with a purpose towards the house. Holding the back door open, he whistles and waits until Winston is safely inside the cabin before he marches upstairs to hunt through the dresser drawer. He used to keep letters from Hannibal, courtesy of the BSHCI, in, the ones he never opened. There isn't an abundance of them, just enough to travel with, when he arrives in Freddie's stomping ground, so to speak. Hannibal used to iterate the importance of a clever backup plan. These he can offer in case the information about the camera footage isn't enough for her to hand over a substantial amount of information in return. The public will say he's selling out, but he cares less what the world thinks about him, and more about getting to the bottom of the never-ending doubt he carries daily, swathed in his stomach lining like a fetus.
What are you doing?
Molly's voice startles him, and the papers slip out of his hands and scatter all over their bedroom floor, at his feet. It's fortunate he had the foresight to keep them in manila folders many years ago, just in case she went looking. With a telling twinge in his bad shoulder, he comes to a steady realization about all the sneaking around he was doing in their marriage, even unintentionally. One more, of 1,000 reasons, to feel guilty about how he's affecting Molly and her life. He needn't tell her he's hoarding letters from Hannibal Lecter. If she knew there were letters from a serial killer in the same house as her son, she may very well kill him. But he owes her the truth. I'm leaving town for a couple days. Molly looks floored. She crosses her arms.
Were you going to tell me? Or were you just going to disappear and have me expect the worst?
As he's gathering up the clustered folders on the floor, he can't help but pause, not having expected the rancor in her voice. Politely, he tucks the papers back into his private drawer so he can give her his full attention. Of course I was going to tell you. I'm not leaving right this instant.
Well, I wouldn't know, would I?
She retorts. Will flinches and she drops her arms with a defeated huff. Listen, Moll, he starts cautiously. I know I haven't been ideal company. I know we haven't talked, and I know there's a lot of things I could be doing that I'm not. I don't have an excuse. Her expression falls as limp as her arms.
No, I'm being rotten. You just came out of a coma, for Christ's sake.
That doesn't mean you shouldn't treat me the way you normally would.
I don't normally snap at you. I don't do the yelling thing, Will. I don't do bitchy spouse or claustrophobic housewife.
She tugs at her loose hair and groans.
This isn't me.
Reaching out as he would to a skittish stray, Will touches her cheek, waiting a moment before he rubs his thumb under her eye in circles, firm and assuring. I've learned the hard way. There's never a normal you can feasibly return to after experiencing a submersion of violence, however brief. But even then, however wavy the ground feels beneath your feet, it will stabilize. Though he suspected she would feel relieved, she instead looks as if she's relinquishing something dear to her. She pulls his hand down, away from her face, but holds it between them.
Where are you going?
Molly asks softly, and it's obvious the last thing she wants to do is to change the subject, but she doesn't feel strong enough to face whatever revelations illuminated her thoughts. He sighs, eliminating the point of contact between them. Sounds. She has something I need. I agreed to an interview. Molly's eyes flash up to meet his own, and this time, he can't look away. The glass shards are loyally present. The chapel awaits in their reflective depths. He's hypnotized by them, though he knows Molly's voice has once again roughened at the edges, and there is a hint of accusation in her response.
You're giving that vulture what she wants?
She had stipulations, Will murmurs, crossing the room to check the closet. He has to be certain they have enough blankets for him to lay out in the back of his truck. He doesn't feel like checking into a hotel Sunday night, especially not if he wants to bring Winston with him.
You didn't have to agree to them.
I told you, she has something I need.
Is she holding something over you?
Molly stammers, encroaching his space. Her body language is gradually bordering on confrontational.
Because, the last person I want you to call is Jack Crawford. But if he can help you get her off your back, then...
I'm not being blackmailed, he responds, disbelieving.
What do you need from her then?
I can't tell you that. Molly is stricken. Will realizes the truth has painted him into a corner. He shouldn't have begun telling it to her in the first place, when he knows he can only ever offer half-truths, never full. For a tense period, they stand at an impasse. Will can sense the end of a long road. He wants to navigate the road bumps just a little longer, but both he and Molly are behind the wheels of two separate cars, approaching a fork.
I don't want you to do that interview.
Molly. He sighs, prepared to defend his stance as much as he can, but she raises her hands between them, palms up before she clenches them together with impressive restraint.
You can't be unaware how that would affect me. Wally.
I won't mention you, or him. You know that.
Do you know how often I was badgered for statements while you were out cold? I wasn't just at Grandma's because I didn't want to even breathe the air in this house, but because I literally couldn't get 2 steps across the porch without paparazzi crowding me. I can't face that again, Will. I can't make Wally wait any longer than he needs to in order to get his life back on track again. This isn't about you.
Will sucks his lips between his teeth. He hadn't even considered that. All that was on his mind was learning more about Hannibal's fate. For all that he's accomplishing in his name, he hasn't thought too thoroughly of him. He's thought of the past, acted and spoken in ways he is aware mirrors the man, but he hasn't truly imagined him. He's not sure if it's because he's afraid to face harsh reality, or because he's still convinced he hasn't woken up yet.
Unless you want to tell me why in the hell this means so much to you that you'd risk all that, then I don't want you to go. I don't want to be ultimatum girl either, but we're not exactly in a normal situation anymore, like you said. I want you to heal, Will, but not like this.
Okay, Will murmurs. Okay, I'll call Jack. See if he can give me what I need. He doubts it. Jack was not, in any manner of speaking, forthcoming during his brief visit at the hospital. But if this is Molly's last straw, he figures he can try his best to take a different approach.
Okay.
Molly echoes, sounding unconvinced. Why are you back so early? he asks, cringing inwardly at his inability to change a subject without sounding like a complete prick. He can't exactly rely on macho flirtation here.
I had to call Kenny. My car broke down on the road to Grandma's house. He towed it back for me.
She blinks erratically and adds hurriedly,
He's got a cousin in the motor business.
"That's generous of him. Small talk has never felt so much like pulling teeth."
Yeah.
Molly averts her eyes.
I'm probably going to be staying over with Wally tonight. I just came up to grab a spare toothbrush, actually.
She hesitates, then notes,
Kenny's waiting outside to drive me back up there.
"Tell him thanks from me." Will endeavors to be cordial, forcing his lips into a smile that translates more as a grimace.
Right, okay.
Molly replies, her voice cracking slightly as she turns to leave. She ghosts past the bathroom, either forgetting her toothbrush or aiming to not spend another millisecond in their bedroom.
I'll do that.
She concludes with one last pleading glance toward him. The door shuts with a quiet click. Will slumps down on the bed, the springy contraption smelling consistently of dust and disuse. He shuts his eyes. He's assaulted with the sensation of a cage downsizing around his body, folding his limbs awkwardly to fit inside its negative spaces. It hurts, and he wants nothing more than to find the key and unlock the heavy padlock. But its existence eludes him. Without a wife to wait for, Will doesn't submit to sleep. He wanders the barren woodland of Maine, underdressed for the weather, with nothing but his uncharged phone in his pocket and a collar, just in case Winston escapes the house and wanders after him. There are thousands of stars in the sky. It always reminded him the most of Wolf Trap. There were times in those first couple years out here he felt so alone, he had to look up. They also remind him of someone. Nights spent at sea, sailing to find Hannibal. He had looked up at the stars on the open ocean and wondered. Then, he hadn't known Hannibal was doing everything in his power to forget, while Will was suffering nights of mental repetition, reliving the pain of separation, dividing his own mentality by debating incessantly with a ghost birthed from both his and Hannibal's implicit need to be seen. He watched the glittering white specks in the sky and asked himself, equity and mentality, watching them together, aware and unaware of each other, across a distant world. Now he looks up at them and understands with horror how loneliness creates a world more vast, more untenable than ever. He cannot yield to the actuality where he may have to consume the sky and its stars alone now, forever uncertain of if there is a soul appreciating it as he does. He fondles the phone in his pocket and pulls it out into the chilled air. He sits by a ravine, its borders raised far above the trickling water. He lets his legs swing there before he reluctantly scrolls through his contacts to find Jack's number. Will runs down verbal options while the line rings. He could say, "Hey Jack, I think you're a liar. Where's Hannibal?" Or even, "I have plans to get you in trouble with the board of directors again. Want to stop me?" All it takes is one word of validation so that I know I'm not spiraling. Instead, all those options fly out the window when Jack answers with a rough,
Hello, Will. Are you all right?
Will's throat quivers and he sucks in a series of shaky breaths.
Jack.
He whispers, so softly the other man stops breathing just to hear him. "Jack, if I told you I wasn't going to run away with him, if I promised, would you tell me he's alive?" Will could be at peace if he knew. He planned to be locked up once, with just the knowledge of Hannibal's escape from America, to comfort him on the quiet nights when everything aches like a bruise. Jack is silent enough that Will thinks he actually hung up.
Will, I won't be dishonest. Get help. Talk to someone, please. For your wife's sake.
The line beeps, like one of those heart rate monitors at the hospital. There is a moment where the answer finally cements itself in his mind, hardened enough that he begins to feel out of body, tingling all over, his body in need of something he's not giving it. Will sets his phone down on the grass and removes the collar from his pocket and places it atop the phone. Not quite associating the acts of what he's doing with his own hands, he doesn't bother folding his clothes as he peels them off. The winter bites at his skin, not as cold as it could be, but adequately chilling. He wades into the water of the ravine, his nude and warped skin sparkling all over under the moonlight. He doesn't know how far he wanders, but his feet start to feel numb after a while, then his legs. The water swishes around him, tickling his sides. He reaches a point in the river where he's submerged, waist deep. It's not as cold as the Atlantic, despite the peace that arrives with it. The cold showers were one thing, but this is what he needed. The thoughts in his head coming to a freezing halt. Though his body is fighting for survival outside his realm of understanding, his mind is sending signals that his physical form is where it's meant to be, where it shouldn't have been exhumed. He sinks lower and observes the unfamiliar trees towering all around him. Maine is so beautiful, macabre and mundane. He trembles violently enough that his view of the world seems to shake with him, like a bluff eroding under him. But this time he's weightless and floating along, unsure what he's seeking, but knowing he'll find it now. He's completely out of it when he registers hands on his body, tugging at him, letting him plop onto a scratchy patch of dry land. It's grassy and smells like earth. He can hear expletives ricocheting through the air around him from a gruff voice, but he's somewhere far away, still cold enough to the touch to imagine he's sitting on the floor of the ocean, waiting for those hands to pull him back to that light. The light cutting through the dark sea hasn't left his dreams. He keeps seeing it. That must mean something, right? The world blurs and he passes out. When he wakes, it's with a shivering start and, strangely clear-headed, more than he's been for weeks. He immediately jots down that he's in a stranger's house, naked except for the blankets wrapping him up, burrito style. They're all hideously patterned. He can barely remove himself from them, but when he starts trying, the older man that saved him scurries over with a soup bowl in his hands.
"Slow down, young man,"
he warns coarsely.
"You were damn near frostbit, you hear?"
Will nods, eventually sitting up and extricating both his arms so he can take the bowl. He's not sure when he ate last. Maybe Molly's omelets. Either way, he's starving.
"What the hell were you doing taking a dive in this weather, son?"
Looking for something, Will mutters, voice scratchy with a cold. That didn't take long. Getting sick usually arrives with a brain tumor and a half-assed apology from his psychiatrist.
"I hope you don't mind me saying, you're a moron."
Yeah.
"Listen, you, need help of some sort? Mental help?"
Will blinks away the foggy film obstructing his eyesight and observes the man before him. He's got a long gray beard and is just an edge past overweight. Darting his eyes around the room, he realizes he's taking up the only bed. The whole house has 4 walls. Probably uses an outhouse also. The words mental help catch up to him, and Will laughs. Hannibal, I wish you were here to hear this. The man appears mortified, and Will waves a hand. Sorry. Thank you, but no. The man starts grumbling about stupidity and bad choices, and Will zones him out so he can finish his soup in peace. He'll thank the man properly when his legs stop tingling and he can stand. Hopefully he can borrow some clothes and trudge back to the cabin by himself. He has no clue how long he was floating. Maybe less than a mile. He'd woken up self-assured that the world is exactly as it's meant to be. And that means Hannibal is truly alive. If he weren't, the universe wouldn't have allowed him to escape the hands of fate a second time. Hannibal is alive because Will is. It's simply a matter of how and where. The most prudent thing on his mind is that he has no choice but to give Freddie her cherished exclusive. Whatever that may mean for what's left of his and Molly's relationship, so be it.